Well, I'm here again today with Andrew Martin. We've decided that we're going to, at least for the foreseeable future, get together about once a month and kind of talk about things, explore things that he speaks on deeper from his videos, things that are rolling around in my head. So if you want to learn more about Andrew, you can go to andrewmartin.energy, as well as how often do you post videos on YouTube?
On YouTube, usually twice a month is the standard, and sometimes more.
Yeah, so I highly recommend checking them out. You're a fantastic motivational speaker. I will put that. I'm
Thank you.
always like feeling like charged up and yeah, I'm going to go take on the world after one of your videos. So
I'm going to do it.
yes, I highly, highly recommend checking those out. And again, you can just go to YouTube, Andrew Martin Energy. Well, how are you doing today?
Today's a good day. Yeah, today's a good day. It was threatening snow. I'm in Colorado, and it was threatening snow this morning. And I want like a 3-foot dump of snow. Like I literally want to be snowed in. Like I have memories of that as a kid growing up in Wyoming. So for me, it's not winter unless I really get one of those good heavy duty snows. So we didn't get any snow today, but I made the most of it. I baked and was domestic today. It was a good day.
Yeah,
How are
I
you
love
today?
those days. Well, I woke up, so it doesn't really snow where I live in Japan. And this morning I woke up and nothing sticking or anything, but just little snow flurries while the sun was rising. And it was really, really beautiful because I love snow. Like the other day, we got a little bit of a storm. Again, it's too warm for it to stick, but I'm like walking with my tongue out and like, woo, I love this. And everybody's got they've got the paper over their heads or the umbrellas in the snow. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love snow.
I love snow too. And as I'm looking into this new project that I'm working on, this flower farm, one of the things that I am so very aware of is so many of the flowers that I love require frost. So I'm looking, the areas that I'm considering I have to have a frost. There has to be a proper winter.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love
that's
winter.
really cool.
It's very
Flower
exciting.
farm. So
yeah, that can be a whole other subject of a conversation. But yeah, it sort of ties in with today's, conversation around cleaning out the junk drawer, literally and metaphorically, physically and metaphysically. It does. I think for me with this flower farm project, it's the realization of something that was a long time dream that I didn't even really realize was a long time dream until I really started sitting with it. And through my own process of, cleaning up my own junk drawer, and especially it's gone into overdrive with this past year, which I think it has for most of us. I think that introspection path is very well worn at this point after the past year. I'm realizing there's also, when we're cleaning out the junk drawer and releasing or letting go, sometimes I think there's this idea that it's only going to be bad things. But what I'm realizing also is sometimes some things are really good and still they have run their course, right?
yes.
Like sometimes you can know that, oh, we're just done. And so my practice is something that I'm not stepping away from like tomorrow, but I know that in the next 2 to 3 years, I'm going to be stepping away from it full time. I don't know. I have a sense that the flower farm is going to be like an iteration of the healing practice. It's going to include that as well. Because what's more healing than getting your hands in the dirt and learning how to grow something? But what I'm realizing is that there's this level of spiritual maturity that is being required of many of us. And I've talked about this before. And for me, a marker of spiritual maturity is I don't need it to be bad in order to know that it's done or that I'm ready to leave. So it's exciting. It's so exciting. But it's also like I'm digging into corners that I thought were cleaned out long ago. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's more stuff to look at.
Well, and that to me is how we know we're doing meaningful work. Because if it wasn't meaningful, that stuff wouldn't come up. Right? We
That's an
wouldn't have
awesome
to look
perspective.
at all of the doubts and the fears and all of those things that then they show up and you're like, oh, wow, I got to look at that again. I thought
Yeah.
I thought we were done with that.
Right.
Oh no, it's coming up, but just from a different angle. And
Yeah.
so that to me just says that we had this conversation in our group, we're in our intention group, and we talked about asking ourselves the question, think of a time you were most happiest, think of a time you were most proud. And often, almost every time when people say, or express their proudest moment, it is always because there was perseverance and challenge and looking at your shit and all of those things that came up. And then they realized just how fruitful that process of having to look at your stuff and work through it and continue and be consistent and committed and all of those things. And ultimately, those are the types of things that come up when they think of, the time I was most proud.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And it's interesting because I used to say the same thing when I was a makeup artist trainer, and I would tell, new makeup artists who were just, they were I was like, well, you're nervous because it's important to you, right? It means something to you. This is important or valuable, or you care about it in some way. So I think it's a good thing for us to hold that close. And at this point in my journey, thank God, I'm not averse to my stuff coming up. It doesn't send me screaming and running and looking for some sort of thing to numb or, numb out or soothe like it used to. Now I'm like, oh, okay, little healing visitor. What are you about? Like, let's talk. But yeah, it is. And it's funny because that's sort of, I know the emotional architecture was something we had also sort of talked about, maybe talking about, but that's kind of what the premise of the emotional architecture is you look historically at when have you felt the most alive, the most fulfilled, the most yourself, the most at home. And you start to extract these experiences and you look at, well, what emotion, energy, or feeling was present during that experience. And so we start to drill down to what I believe is the fundamental reason for any choice is because of the payoff we think we'll receive, right? Why do I do it? Because it's going to make me feel a certain way, essentially. So yeah, it's interesting to begin to look at things in that way. And even to drill even deeper into another layer of that, when I started really looking at my practice as because here's a little bit of backstory. So I have been with a friend of mine who's also a practitioner and a really good friend and also a colleague. And for the past couple of years, I'd been getting this sense of like, God, I really, someday I really want to be able to close my calendar. And mostly it was just because I enjoy doing group stuff more now than I do just one-on-one stuff. I still enjoy it to an extent, but it was something that I would think about and I would intellectualize and I would talk about, but I wouldn't really feel what that meant. And so as I sat down to start this flower course, which began on this past Friday, it's a 6-week course from this woman who owns a flower farm who's wildly successful. And so she essentially gives you everything you need in this 6-week course. And so as I started the course on Friday, suddenly it went from an idea of leaving my practice one day to a reality. And I felt the portal of that experience open up within me. And I can tell you, it scared the crap out of me. I was like, whoa, what? And what I was fascinated by was how much of my identity was wrapped up in being a healer. I'm just making bunny quotes for people because this is, not audio or not video. But anyway, so a couple of days ago, as all this stuff started to get stirred up and I found another junk drawer essentially that needed some examination. And I said, okay, I need some clarity here. So I thought, well, let me look at my current practice and focus on what I love about that. Like, what is it about my current practice that really lights me up? What I realized is all of the things now that I love about my practice are not exclusive to my practice. I can get those things from other avenues and other ventures, and it doesn't have to be, as Andrew Martin, energy the healer. So it's fascinating to me when we start to look at just the structure of our life from that energy, feeling, and emotion perspective. And like you with the snow, right? It's like you're like a little kid all of a sudden, right? It's like that joyful, gleeful, like, yay, snow. And everyone else is like curmudgeonly, I gotta go to work in the snow.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I love, that's something that I think about a lot too, that idea of drilling down, going underneath the experience, because you're right. Once you understand what within you gets to be expressed or what it is that really is lighting you up. Like the other day we were talking about in the attention group, that those goals, that 10 pounds represents something bigger. It's not about the 10 pounds. It's about the experience you get to have, whether that's the experience of boundaries or work-life balance or just general, like that. There's something about that gives you the opportunity or provides the expression of something that you desire. And as soon as we understand that, we realize that it's not the role of the teacher. That role allowed the expression of something. So it's not the role of the healer that allowed for the expression of something. And once you understand that, you can say, oh, well, that can be expressed in this way, and it can be expressed in this way. And so I don't need to be tied to that role to still have that level of
That
fulfillment.
thing. Right. It's like the rat in the maze. I think the only way I'm going to get the cheese is if I go through this well-worn path. And that's absolutely what I know, is that if I'm already choosing things because of what I know or hope that experiential payoff will be, then all I have to do is figure out what I want the payoff to be first, focus on that, and then I'm guaranteed that my experience will support that choice to be joyful or creative or compassionate or whatever. And it's the same thing with money, right? Money problems are never about money. Love issues are never about love. You don't want the house because you want the house. You want the house because of what you think you'll feel and the life that you imagine when you're in that house. So, yeah, it's amazing when we start to look at it from, like, it's almost like the essence of our soul's DNA, like what really lights our soul up. Because what I've also been aware of is that, and I've had a lot of my own businesses. I had a makeup artist business. I had a house cleaning business. I had a home staging business. I had a makeup product and education business. And now I'm on Andrew Martin Energy. With all of these businesses, I've learned a ton, but I have not been 100% invested in any of them. Every single one, there's been a level of me that's going, yeah, it's cool, but I don't really care. And now what I'm finding is there isn't that level within me with this flower farm. Like every single part of me is lit up. And that's what I call it, being in the room. Like when I talk a lot about, like, let all of yourself in the room, that's what I mean. But yeah, it's the experience you want.
Yeah. It keeps dropping in, so I want to take the direction. I want to go where I'm guided here. But this idea of having the flower farm, and it also being an aspect of the healing work you do, and the whole aesthetics thing, and the connection to beauty. And to me, of course, you have the real, like, tangible and visceral experience of being in the dirt, which is fantastic, right? But there's also something really about the aesthetics and the beauty there that
Yeah.
I think it adds a whole layer. Like, I don't know why I didn't know this, but I recently met a friend here, and he studied aesthetics philosophy. And I didn't even know there
Mm.
was a branch of philosophy that was
That's
primarily,
fascinating.
yeah, concerned
We're going
with,
to talk about pretty things all day. Like, sign me up.
yes. And actually, once I understood that, he made so much more sense, because he was always talking about, like, the sensual aspects of food, and just, the flowers here. Like, it's so beautiful in Japan. It's a very concrete place, but it actually feels really earthy instead of fake, because, like,
Mm,
they just have these massive walls that are just made of river rocks, and, like, yeah, it's just really cool. But then so many people have their little pots that they have just outside. So they got this tiny little apartment, and they have their little pots with their flowers, and the flowers are always seasonal. And they're, right now there's a lot of cabbages, and beautiful,
mm,
like, purple cabbages and kales and kind of things. And there's something about that beauty piece, that aesthetic, that and the time and the attention that's required to give that life, or
yeah.
to nurture that life. There's something really beautiful about that. I mean, literally and, and figuratively, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I
Well,
just
and there's so, it's like to me, it's the magic of, like, last year I planted some poppies, and literally the teeniest little seed, the size of a grain of sand, gives you in, 8 to 12 weeks, this gorgeous, abundant, massive plant with flower after flower after flower that it just would not stop. And to me, that is astounding. That is astounding to me, that in that teensy little thing, it has all that it needs to
Mhm.
produce what it is, and all it needs is the right kind of attention.
Yes. And then it seems so weird that we, especially in kind of Western medicine, the way that we view the body, that it's like everything has that intelligence,
Yeah.
including us, right? Everything has what it needs within it. All the what are those cells at the beginning where then they differentiate? I can't remember right now, but um, Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, so it's just amazing to me that if we nurture in the right way,
Mm.
that we, you know, like kind of going with the flow of the river and understanding that instead of thinking, oh yeah, no, we got to dam the river here and we got to put, you know, obstacles and barricades over here and deal with it. It just is amazing to me. So I think on so many levels, there's the opportunity for people to connect to their own intelligence, to the beauty of the, like, I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the power of learning how to nurture and care and bring life to another living thing is so fundamental to who we are as humans, that and we are so cut off from that in so many ways. And personally, I just realized that, you know, one of my main drivers in my entire life has been this liberty and this freedom and this liberation. And part of how that's manifested itself is through wanting to be self-employed since as long as I can remember. And just like owning that and really like taking accountability for that 100%. Um, but also understanding that I can bring people to something that they've lost touch with. Like
Mhm.
I can create a space where people can come. And what you know, what kind of dawned on me yesterday was part of it really is selfish in that even though I love what I'm doing, and it's been what, 7, 8 years that I've been building this practice, I'm still inside staring at a screen.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's not the life I want.
Yeah. It's so tricky though, because like when I think about when I'm not doing work, the stuff that I love to do, still I love to write. But unless I, you know, it doesn't make sense to handwrite and then go and go write it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I like to read, but often, especially in Japan, it's hard to get books. So I get them on Kindle. So again, I'm staring at a screen. There's just so many things. It's like, how do you get away from that? So I love
Yeah.
that you're building something that's a screen-free experience.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And that, you know, I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not one to poo-poo technology or advancements in that way, because convenience is important in many ways. And especially if I'm looking at, you know, starting a farm. But it also, I'm really, really drawn to the things that don't require technology to get done.
Yes.
I mean, people farmed for centuries without power and running water. So it can be done. I mean, it's a lot harder, obviously, but you know what I mean? And I think that that's the other thing is, for you and your love of reading and your love of writing and understanding that, you know, especially where we are just in our world, we have sort of created so many places where you can't do it other than on a screen. And so many of us are now dependent on it. And I get that. But like for me, it's the trade-off, right? It's worth it for me to sit here and chat with you for a bit on via the screen because I love our conversations. It's worth it for me to sit with a client for an hour or a group with 2 hours or for 2 hours or whatever, but then I find myself having so much time and so much energy and nothing to do. And that also is this big piece is like, oh, well, with this flower farm, I will have plenty to do. There will never be a lack of things to do. But I think it's like, my point is for us to have that sovereign authority to choose.
Mhm.
Like I choose to stare at a screen because I love it. The payoff is worth it.
Yes. Doesn't it make you're talking about having sort of a domestic day? And when that's one of the things that I love to do that I don't need a screen is to bake and to cook.
Yeah, I
And I
love
love
it.
that.
I love it so much. It has, and I've always loved that. And, you know, I'm so grateful that my mother and my granny both taught me so much about how to be in the kitchen and cook and bake, and they instilled that love of that within me. And I really, for me, it's one of my primary forms of self-care is to cook and to bake, and it's therapeutic. And honestly, I love watching people eat the stuff that I baked more than I enjoy eating it myself, really. I mean, unless I'm making it for lunch for myself. But yeah, there's something to, again, it's like my hands are in it. I'm touching the thing that I'm making. I'm not removed by this digital barrier. I'm not, you know, it's like I can see you and I'm touching my screen, but there's no Angela in there. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like this visceral, real, tangible experiences I just find myself craving so much. And maybe part of it has been being in lockdown, but that's what I want. like, I just want to crawl in a hole with flowers and just like live there. Like
Well, it goes back to the aesthetics thing again, right? Where you're inviting all of the senses.
yeah.
Here, yeah, I'm hearing you and I'm seeing you, but like when you cook or you bake in your hands, it's visceral, it's, tactile. You can hear, like when you're cooking, hearing the way that it sounds is a huge piece of data, piece of feedback telling you, is
Yes.
it too hot? Is it too cold? It's the way that you extract the flavors. It's a relationship. There's so many beautiful things about it.
Yeah.
And yes, there's those types of kind of sensual experiences are grossly diminished or lacking
Yeah.
in
And it's funny because I'm
on a
looking at
screen.
this book right now on my desk. It's The Spell of the Sensuous by that guy. What's his name? David Abram. And he talks all about that, about how humans are designed to consume stimulus, right? Like, how many orifices do we have that are designed to stick things in, or we were able to put stuff into? You know what I mean? Like, when we're wired to receive, we're wired to engage, and we're wired to engage on multiple levels simultaneously. And so, I think of my granny. She knew the bread was done baking by the smell. She knew if the pie crust was correct by touching it. She didn't need a timer. She didn't need measuring. She made pie crust by putting her hand in the thing of flour and scooping it in the bowl until it looked like the right amount. So yeah, we've lost that. So many of us have lost that. Like, I mean, our entire body is covered with this feeling, sensing organ, the skin being the largest organ. And we're covering it up and hiding indoors.
Yeah.
No, it's just I crave those real, visceral, like, let me connect with something physically experiences more and more.
I agree. Yes. Ooh, that got me all excited.
Me too. I'm gonna
Well,
go plant some flowers and bake some cookies.
I wanna talk about your last video, which was cleaning out the junk drawer. That was
Mm.
something that I did before I moved to Japan, and something I need to do again. Like, my husband and I have been together. This is going on our 23rd year.
Wow.
We've lived in 3 countries. We've moved a lot, and I think right before we moved to Japan, I was like, I don't want to just take half of our house and put it in storage. Like, I want to go through everything. And I also really wanted to do it in a way that was honoring my values in the earth. So I didn't want to just take stuff and just throw it in the
Dumpster or
dumpster.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to process it as much as I could, recycle what I could, so I could minimize what was going to go in the landfill. And I realized, like, I had these boxes of books and notebooks, binders full of stuff from when I went to university. Now, my background is actually exercise physiology. And
I
so
didn't know that.
yeah,
That's amazing.
I had a lot of books on physiology and biology and, vertebrate anatomy and all of those things. And I had carted these books. And of course, they're heavy from place to place to place. And I thought, okay, what am I really doing with this shit? Like, what is this all about? Because
Yeah.
honestly, all of that information I could find on the internet.
Right. You
Right.
don't need 500 pounds of books.
Especially like written notes. Am I ever going to look at it? But I realized, and you talked at the beginning about letting that piece go. And I realized for me, it was about integration, that is always going to be a part of me. Like, there's going to be the person that likes the scientific, the rational, all of that. Like, I remember while I was going to university, it was at the same time I was doing my Reiki, my 3 levels of Reiki, and working for the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists, where you didn't say anything unless you could cite your sources. And then I had this other side where it was everything was experiential, and how does it feel, and get in touch with your senses. And so these really kind of juxtaposition between like the rational and the intuitive and energetic. And I realized as I was going through my stuff that I wanted to keep that part of me, because I wanted to be able to say, hey, look, yes, I'm woo woo and I'm all those things, but look I also am down with this. And I realized that
Hmm.
I didn't need that anymore, because I had integrated those pieces and I had kind of done enough of my work that it didn't matter to me. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore.
Yeah.
And so I started like ripping out the papers from the coil rings so I could recycle those. And it was really a cathartic experience, like ripping things out, right? So it could be broken down and recycled. And um, it was a really wonderful cathartic experience to go and I went through the junk drawer that we've probably moved some of that stuff like over 20
For
years.
24 years, yeah.
Yes. And
Like
going
this ketchup packet from our first date.
yes. And it was a really cool experience, but I described it as kind of this continual surrender. Like it was this surrendering of these ideas. They were surrendering these pieces of these identity that, may or may not fit in anymore. But I looked at it as an opportunity, like I said, for integration and realizing that it was healthy. Everything has a life cycle, everything, and some of those things were ready to die. And that was perfectly okay. And there was no reason to carry that residual energy from place to place. So it was a wonderful like healing experience to do that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's funny because around that message, actually, the cleaning out the junk drawer, it was kind of prompted by just being in meditation one morning with Osiris and just kind of, sort of feeling that relationship and the exchange. And then suddenly I was just really inspired to physically clear my space. And, I've been here in Colorado with my sister and brother-in-law for about 1.5 years now. So I don't have all the stuff that I own, which I don't own a lot, frankly. I'm down to, I think, maybe 12 boxes of stuff, and that's it. But still, since leaving Seattle in 2016 and then up until now, I've been on this sort of peripatetic journey where I haven't really been in a place for more than a year, except for here in Colorado over the past five years. And so even I had accumulated a box of stuff. I had unopened mail from 2017 when I was back in Brooklyn for 6 months. I had unopened stuff from San Francisco. It's like, and it was the same thing of like, why am I carting this crap around? And even stuff that I have been moving with me for more than 20 years was kind of lost or showed up in this shuffle. So basically I did the same thing. I sat down with this entire box of papers and just stuff. I said, I am not leaving this room until it's organized or I've decided what to do with it and I've done it. No more piles of, I'm going to throw that away tomorrow. Like, no, you're doing it now. And so I went through all of that and I got it all organized and it felt great just for the sake of doing it. And it was a little bit cathartic, but what I found to be the most powerful was after I came back into the office, I went and had dinner and was hanging out in the living room and then came back in and I could feel like something had shifted. Like it was literally like the energy was so different. And over the next couple of days, it continued to grow in this spaciousness. And I think had I done that probably 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have been that sensitive to that subtle of an expansion. But because I have been so kind of stripped over this past year, I found myself really aware of that. And it was fascinating to me. And what I'm so consumed by almost, because that junk drawer video, a lot of people responded very positively saying, that was just the kick in the butt I needed. Thank you so much. And I was like, well, I was just kind of sharing. Like I really had no agenda other than to share. But like, I just felt this, I don't know, it shifted something in me in a way that was totally unexpected. It completely surprised me. And what I'm aware of is what is fascinating to me is how much room even beliefs and ideas take up and how it prevents us from even realizing so much because, it's like we talked about in the last conversation when you were like, well, if you grow up in a world that everything's blue, you don't know what blue is. And it's like, if I tell myself that if I believe that being in a room with 4 walls is evil, right? I've just set myself up for a really difficult life. So that belief takes up so much room in my life and it prevents me from doing so many things. And it has no weight. It's not a thing. And isn't that fascinating?
Mm-hmm.
How just an idea can completely change the reality of your life.
And I find myself now that I am in middle age that this is a really important thing for me to look at is deciding, because I found that even I would say in the last year or two that there's some rigidity to my thinking and so to some of my ideas. And I realized that and that rigidity now is I find that maybe it's sensitivity and maybe it's aging. I don't like to look at it too much that way, but I like to, like I can feel that it gives me a stiffness in body too.
Yeah.
And so this is something, this idea of, what beliefs or what versions of myself or, all of these things that take up space and actually weigh me down and make me feel more rigid. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a continually, like I need to continually allow myself to slough those off, kind of like you slough off dead skin, because otherwise they harden like a callus.
Yeah.
And that's why you get curmudgeon-y and get off my lawn kind of.
Yeah, totally. And you have a Michael Douglas falling down moment or whatever that movie was.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah,
But
no, I don't either.
I've thought a lot. I'm like, I can see how that happens. And so this is something that I think cleaning out my junk drawer is something that I'm going to need to do on a regular basis now,
I
because
agree.
I don't know that I can get away with this, having those things linger like I could have when I was younger. And I don't know
Yeah.
necessarily that that's because physiologically I'm aging. I think it's more because of my mindset and my framing, and my sensitivity grows. I think, just like you said, like you might not have been able to feel that space within you a few years ago, but now you can. And I think as my perception shifts and as I pay more attention, yeah, that stuff just doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, you can only walk around the elephant in the room for so long. And yeah, that elephant gets smaller and smaller. And I think sometimes it's big and sometimes it's not, depending on what the thing is. And with the junk drawer idea, like I agree. I think it's something we do consistently throughout our life. And I think sometimes I'm integrating, sometimes the process is about integration, sometimes the process is about disintegration and letting go. Sometimes it's a reclamation or a reminder of something. Sometimes it's, sort of writing my rudder and going, oh yeah, that's why I got into this in the first place. It helps me remember what my initial hope was. But yeah, I think that rigidity, and I always just remember, like, it's the trees that have the deepest roots and the most flexibility that survive the storm. So for me, that's about being deeply rooted in my values for myself, what I believe is important in my life and what I want to share and put out there. And then just being really flexible with the rest. Like this comes back to this idea of the flower farm and the realization that I don't have to be doing a specific thing to get the things that light me up, especially now that I know what they are. Right?
Yes.
That's what I take with me. And what I'm aware of is every single business I've had has built upon the one previous. And even my first solo venture when I was a freelance makeup artist, that was built upon years of just being artistic and creative. And then the next business built on the last one, and so on and so on. So and this is what I think is important when we're talking about the junk drawer, for me anyway, is that I don't think it's about necessarily cutting myself off from something I was or used to be or don't want to be anymore. I think it's about allowing what still works and what's still relevant to be the foundation that I build upon. Because there's so much stuff after having run 6 or 7 businesses of my own that I just know that I take for granted that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that I have a lot of learning to do, but I also have a lot of stuff that I'm already standing on. So I think for me, that's important, is to remember that it's not about saying, okay, I'm never going to do this again, right? I'm never going to eat chocolate again. Throw all the chocolate away, and then 2 days later, I'm like, oh, I really want some chocolate. But it's like letting that love for whatever it is, or the lesson, or like you said, with all of your education and all that information, it's there still somewhere. And if you forget it, you just click, 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 and you can find it online. And it's interesting when you're talking about physically how you feel that rigidity. I've been working a lot with the fascia in the body and this block therapy practice that I've started, where you're essentially these cedar blocks. And Lisa actually started it. So she is also a fan of it and has been exploring it. But essentially, you're taking these bamboo blocks or these cedar blocks, and you're like putting your body weight onto them in specific angles and specific ways. And they're all soft edges. There's no hard angles. But essentially, it's all designed to unleash the fascia and release it from the bone and the adhesions that have happened. And what is fascinating to me is when we're talking about ideas taking up space, I'm finding that the fascia, and anyone who's studied the fascia knows this, that it hangs on to memory. It hangs on to a lot of that stuff. And I have found myself just a normal day getting ready to do my class, and I'm down on the block, and all of a sudden these tears just come out of nowhere. And I'm like, I know I just tapped into some physically stored emotion. And so if emotion can be stored, then so are ideas and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Because emotion isn't a thing either.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I absolutely. And that's why, going back to your idea about keeping the stuff that works and letting the stuff that needs to disintegrate. And so I wrote that article about the bats, and the bats are about transformation and birth, death, rebirth, and all of those things. And yes, at the end of the blog post, I posed 2 questions. What within you is ready to be alive, and what within you is ready to die? And so allowing that stuff that's ready to die does create that space, and it does allow the opportunity for those things to flourish and to blossom within you. So,
Yeah.
but yes, doing the physical work, I'm realizing I just can't get away with stuff that I could get away with when I was younger. And now it's like, no, balance is so important, and making sure that I'm moving my body. And the other day I was playing with my friend. She has a 5-year-old son. We were at the park, and I'm kicking the soccer ball, and I'm on the swing, and I was like, oh, I love this. Like, my son's 13, so he doesn't want to play with me anymore. And I realized, like, I don't have my play partner. And that was a
Yeah.
huge thing that kept my body moving, like down on the floor and crawling through.
Running after him. And yeah.
Crawling through different things in the playground structure, and going on the swings and down this and all of those things. And I was like, can I just be a 43-year-old woman that does that without a child? Or is that
Yeah.
is that too creepy?
Well, I think if you go to like the grown-up playground, no. But some of those playgrounds are like no unattended adults, like only adults accompanied by children are allowed on the playground. But no, it's funny because when I lived in San Francisco, I used to live close to Dolores Park, and there are swings there, and there's like a little playground area. And some of it's specifically for kids, but there's grown-up areas too. And I used to go at night and just like swing on the swing set. And it was so relaxing. And so it just felt so good to do. And it definitely, and you do get some looks from people like, what's, that, but what I have found, and again, this kind of loops back to what we're talking about. And I think it's also relevant to the junk drawer, like the things that are joyful and the things that light us up, those are often buried under all that stuff, right? So it's like, I think that when we're often, when I'm dealing with people in my healing practice and people are afraid to look at that stuff, and I get it, because, right, you think about it, and so you build up all this stuff around it. And so it's generally not as scary as we remember it being, but there's just so much gravity that we give to that stuff. But that's where you find the nuggets too. Like, that's where you find the gems. That's where you find the treasures that you forgot about. So it's like, I think at some point I get excited. Like, my inner child gets really excited when we're doing that work now. Because it's like, okay, more crap is leaving, so we can just have more space, more truth, more just openness, more
Yeah.
childlike moments.
I keep getting that idea that, be lighter, be more playful, get back to your joy. Because I'm a very joyful person, and I love to play. And yeah, I've realized that not having my play partner has made a huge difference. But you're right. When we let go of all of that junk, we realize that that's kind of our natural state, is that lightness, that playfulness, the one that wants to be creative, the one that wants to put our hands in dirt and in dough and
glitter and glue and beads and all that stuff. Well, and that's my, my art journaling practice that I shared on the Chaos and Light site a couple of weeks ago. For me, that's one of the ways that I can make time intentional, but that I can also just let myself be and just create for the sake of creating. It's one of the times where I don't have to have an end result. I don't have to have a destination. I don't have to achieve anything or get anything accomplished. And I used to do that when I was a kid. Like, I used to spend hours just lying on the carpet or the grass and staring up at the sky or the ceiling. And my mom, what are you doing? Just nothing. Like, I knew intuitively that time to just be and to not have an agenda or a thing that you're doing was so crucial. And giving ourselves the spaces to play and just create, right? Like, I hear it all the time when I share my art journaling stuff. Well, I'm not creative. Well, you don't have to be. Literally, all I do is I take a pen and I draw shapes or a compass or a protractor and draw like half circles and right angles. And then I just take some colored pencils and color it in. Like,
Yeah.
really, you just make your own coloring book.
So that right there is that belief of I'm not creative. That takes up a huge space in a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a lie because you are creative. You
Yeah.
created yourself
Yes. We are creating all
all
day,
the
all
time.
the time.
Every
Yeah.
single minute of every single day, yeah, totally. And for me, it just always comes down to a matter, is it intentional on purpose or is it by default and sort of accidental? And and there's this, I always, every time I want to talk about this, I always forget who to credit it. I'll try to find out and send you the information so that we can credit it maybe in the description. But there's this learning diagram. My mother has a PhD in education. Both my parents are teachers. So there's this learning diagram, and it essentially shows you where you move from unconsciously incompetent, which you suck and you don't know it. And this is how adult learners move. We go from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent. Someone tells you you suck and you go, oh, okay, now's my opportunity to get better or correct my mistake. Then you move to unconsciously competent. I'm good, but I don't know it yet. And then consciously competent. So consciously competent is I know I'm good and I can recreate results every single time. Unconsciously incompetent is I suck, I don't know it, but every once in a while I get lucky and get it right. So it's like moving through that diagram. That's what we're always moving towards, is the conscious competence, the conscious creation, the conscious engagement. And that's why I know that the arts are so crucial, because it engages both sides of the brain, right? While the left brain is focusing on the line or the shape or the color of the pen, the right brain is letting in all of this glorious inspiration. And so that's why I think it's so crucial that we have those things that require us to be physically doing something with our hands while engaging. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Absolutely. I think it is. And getting over that idea that there needs to be something, perfect or beautiful or something at the end that,
Or a product
yes, a
that
product.
now you have to go on Etsy. Now you have to have a blog. Now you have to have a website because you were good at it. Or no, or I could just do it because I liked it. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yes. That's
And we
so
always do
important.
that, don't we? We always just want to make everything transactional. Everyone just wants to monetize everything. Well, how about
Yeah.
if you just did it because it made you feel good, and the joy that you felt, or the relaxation, or the ease, or the relief that you felt for giving yourself an hour to not worry about everything? And sometimes that's what I'll do with that creative practice, is I'll just set an hour timer on my phone. Hey, for the next hour, I'm just not going to worry about anything but doodling. And that's my work for the next hour.
Yes. That takes a whole different, like, a switch. It's like a completely different way of approaching things.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our beginning of the conversation about the experience we want to have. We weren't talking about just the outcome, but the experience of while we're doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a hard switch for people, but it's
Yeah.
really, really important, because that's the heaviness. That's the stuff that hangs in the junk drawer. Did I just say junk drawer? Yeah. You know how
Yeah.
do you ever say the drawer is drunk? The drunk drawer?
The
I say
drunk
that.
drawer.
I say that all the time. I'm like, oh, did I just do that again? No,
Yeah.
the junk drawer. Yeah, that's the heaviest stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also the other side of that is, what I believe is, if you woke up in a human body, you still have work to do. So you're not going to get it all done. What's that Abraham Hicks thing, right? You never get it done and you never get it wrong. You're not going to eat all the food that you're going to eat in a lifetime in one meal. There's going to be another meal. So you just, you let it be what it is in the moment and have that experience. And yes, be conscious and present, but also leave room for the unexpected. Like, that to me is what has been so magical about this past year. And not just for myself, but for so many people. I see that for the first time, often ever, they have space in their life. And when I see someone who gets nervous about that, they say, oh, I can't be alone for 20 minutes. Well, then you need to be alone for 2 hours. because sometimes exposure therapy is the only way you're going to get around that. Sometimes that's why sometimes we'll set the timer, because the part of my brain is like, but what are you going to do with the doodle when you're done? Are you going to put it on Instagram? Are you going to do a newsletter? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, we're just doing it for an hour. It's not going to be a thing. Just do it. And I think that's important. We have to kind of make ourselves do that sometimes. You have to be willing to tread into those uncomfortable places and dig through the drawer. Otherwise, you're just going to and good on you, by the way, for deciding that when you came to Japan, you didn't want it to just be putting your crap in storage without really looking at it and deciding, do I want to pay to store this? Like, not many people are willing to do that.
Yeah. My husband would say that I lack sentimentality.
I do too. I
I'm
think
like,
nostalgia is for suckers. I really kind of do. I'm not sentimental. No, that's not true. Nostalgia is beautiful, but sentimentality, not really my thing either.
yeah, but it's so freeing to be able to do that and just open up that space. And what are you carding? Even stuff like cards. Like if somebody gives me a nice card, I'll put it out on display for like a week or two and then I recycle
I
it.
throw it away. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Because
I mean, there's a couple of things like I've hung on to some notes from my granny. I have some notes from my mother. Like there are some things, because there is going to come a time when I'm going to miss seeing my mother's handwriting, and especially now, again, talking about that real analog experience, when was the last time I saw my mother's handwriting? So those little things I think are important. And those I do have some sentimentality around, but no, I'm not saving every freaking card. Give me a break. It cost you 99 cents at King Super. Don't tell me you put thought into it. So don't imbue your sort of half-assed choice with all this meaning now because I want to throw it away. Like that guilt belongs to you. Don't project the fact that you just kind of threw it at me and said, oh, here, this is a card. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, no, it's like, that's like the ears from Disneyland. That's not your experience. It reminds you of the experience, but that's not Disneyland. That's cheap plastic and felt.
And so much of what we need is already within us. Like the stuff, I can't remember where I read this, but the stuff that you really need, you'll be able to call it up when it needs to be called. And so because it's not right on the surface and you can't just automatically like pluck it out and be like, here, the stuff that needed to be integrated, and that you'll need in the future will still be there, even if you don't have the plastic ears.
Exactly. And that memory, I find that the memory sometimes becomes more vibrant if it's just this beautiful thing that lives inside, right? There's not a physical thing. I don't know. We get so attached to what we think things mean. And maybe we're onto something here. Maybe if more people were doing the work of cleaning out the junk drawer and integrating and releasing, more regularly with themselves, maybe they wouldn't have a need to feel connected through a physical object. Maybe that's it, right? If I've lost myself and I have no sense of who I am, maybe this physical thing helps ground me into something. Because I find that the more centered within myself that I have become, the less I care about the crowd. Black t-shirt and jeans, pretty much all I wear anymore. I don't really care about what I would like to look cute, but I don't really care. Like, I don't care about the material stuff that I used to care about. I don't care, for me these days, especially with the flower farm thing, like I'm getting all worked up over Carhartt.com and seed catalogs. Like that's what excites me these days. So, but I think maybe it is when we're so grounded and out there and we think this is the real out here, the outside world is the real deal. Maybe that's part of the spell. That's part of the seduction of the Matrix, is it makes you believe that it's real. And the more you have, the more real it is.
Yeah.
So maybe subconsciously we're trying to convince ourselves of something we know isn't true.
And it has, all of that stuff has energy. So to me, to be connected, I understand what you're saying, but it has the opposite effect. Because everything holds those energy and it just weighs people down in a way that I don't think is.
Yeah. And if you were buying something because you were feeling at a deficit or you're feeling desperate or you're feeling sad, that's what you infused into that energy, into that thing. Like that thing is not infused with joy. If you bought that thing because you were pissed and you were angry and you wanted to soothe, that's what you put into that object. It's not filled with joy and light. It's just not. So yeah, it's like if I have a collection of things that I thought were going to make me happy and they didn't, now I've got a collection of disappointment.
Yes. So purge your junk drawer, people.
That's right. find the nuggets of joy. They're in there.
Well, is there any, we're kind of up on our time. Is there anything else you wanted
Gosh,
to
it goes
touch
so
on?
fast.
It does. Or do you feel complete?
Are we complete? Yeah, I'm feeling complete. I'm feeling complete. I think, you know, if people are curious about that whole idea of the junk drawer, I think it's just identify like a feeling or an experience, right? Think of joy, think of peace, think of balance, whatever, just whatever you feel like in that moment would just be the remedy, right? And just start to be curious about where in your life those things are either supported consciously or unconsciously, right? Like I had a mentor at the very beginning of building my practice said, Andrew, you cannot listen to the rock and roll station if you want to hear jazz. Like you have to decide what you want and actively tune into it.
Yes. And let the stuff that doesn't fit into that, just let it go.
Yeah, totally. Because all you're doing is muddying the waters otherwise.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it feels really good when you unload that crap,
It
the
really
physical
does.
and the non-physical crap. So if you start physical, great, start there and go into, you know, start not just start anywhere because it feels so good. It's so liberating.
Yeah. Start with a room or start
Mm-hmm.
with the literal junk drawer.
Yeah. Start with the corner of your desk.
Yes. Because it can be overwhelming when there's a lot, but I'm actually helping my friend go through this process here. She's like, I need you because you're really cutthroat and you'll just tell me to get like,
Well,
yes.
and that's where the timer comes in, right? Like people, when I'm working with coaching clients or working with someone in a deeper way beyond just an hour, that's what I tell you know, you don't have to do it all right now. Set a timer on your phone for 30 minutes and put it on the counter in the kitchen and then go into the room and for 30 minutes do it. And don't leave that room until you hear the alarm in the other room. And then when the alarm goes off, you just leave that room, shut the door, and then you do it again tomorrow. So yeah, put a timer around it, put a fence around it.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Yeah, tomorrow I'm going to help my friend. Just we're taking one room and we're going to start there, and I'm going to help her empty her junk
Awesome.
drawer. So
I
yes.
want you to have like a megaphone and like a writing prompt. Or you could get one of those those air horn things that when she's being too nostalgic, you can just
I'm pretty much like that. She goes, "Damn, you're a little harsh." I'm like, "Hey, you didn't call me here because you wanted somebody with,
Mhm.
to wear kid gloves. That's
Yes.
not my job
Right.
here." So,
Right. This is house cleaning, not house vacationing. We're not at the
yes.
spa here. If you want soft and sweet, Angela, let's go, you know, get a donut and some coffee. But that's not why you hired me.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like your Terminator comes out.
Well, I'm certainly honest. So I'm like, "Listen, lady, have you worn that in the past year?" "Nope, it goes." "Are you sure?" But I'm nope, it's going.
Oh my God, if you and I lived together, we would have the most Spartan minimal house. That's hilarious. I love
Well,
this conversation.
me too. Well, we'll do it again in about a month. So, again, if you're interested in learning more about Andrew, you can go to andrewmartin.energy. Check out his videos on YouTube that come out a couple of times a month. Again, just search Andrew Martin Energy. And do you have any things coming up or anything you want to?
No, we're just finishing another Void series. We're in the midst of a Void series, which has been such powerful work, and I plan to continue them. You know, one thing that I do want to let people know about is my download store. I have amazing like sound healing and guided meditations on my download store, and I just don't think people know about it. So just want to tell people to check that out because it's a great way to begin doing that kind of work. And if all you have is 20 bucks in 20 minutes, go to the download store and download a 20-minute, you know, sound healing. It's a great place to start. And you can do it in the privacy of your own home. No one has to know what you're doing. You can still be low key, woo woo. No one has to know.
That sounds good. Well, I look forward to next time. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.